I pulled into the parking lot of the Crossroads Motel just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting an eerie glow on the gravel. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked at the wrong mile marker, a relic from a bygone era of road trips, now mostly frequented by truckers and the occasional lost tourist like myself. The lobby smelled of stale cigarettes and pine cleaner. A bell dinged as I pushed through the door, and a man emerged from a back room. He was unusually tall, with a gaunt face that seemed almost too big for his body, and he smiled with a set of teeth that were too perfect to be anything but dentures. "Evening," he greeted, his voice a gravelly whisper that matched the crunch of the parking lot underfoot. "Need a room?" "Yes, just for the night," I replied, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping up my back. "Room 8, last one on the left," he said as he handed me the key, an actual metal key with a plastic keychain that had seen better days. The motel was a single-story, horseshoe-shaped building with doors facing inward toward a courtyard filled with overgrown weeds and a couple of broken lawn chairs. My room was at the far end of the curve, and as I dragged my suitcase along the cracked pavement, I couldn't help but notice the stillness. No sounds of television or chatter, just the distant hum of the highway and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. The room was surprisingly clean, if outdated, with floral wallpaper peeling at the corners and a heavy scent of bleach in the air. I tossed my bag onto the bed, the springs creaking under its weight, and decided a quick shower was in order before bed. As the water heated, I glanced out the window and noticed a group of people gathered by a faded picnic table in the courtyard. They were quiet, almost solemn, and seemed deeply familiar, though I was sure I'd never met them before. Shaking off the déjà vu, I pulled the curtains closed. After my shower, I lay in bed flicking through channels on an old television set that offered more static than shows. Eventually, I settled on the sound of white noise to drown out the unsettling silence of the place. Sometime later, I was jolted awake by the sound of a door slamming. I sat up, heart racing, and listened. Silence. Then footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. I crept to the window and peeked through the curtains. One of the guests I had seen earlier was leaving their room, suitcase in hand, heading towards a car parked in the shadow of the motel sign. Curious, I watched as they drove away, the taillights disappearing into the night. I glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m., an odd time to check out, or maybe just restless spirits like me. But as I tried to settle back into sleep, a nagging thought kept me awake. The man at the desk had said my room was the last one available. So why was one of the guests leaving in the middle of the night? The next morning, I needed answers. I walked to the lobby, the early sun casting long shadows across the courtyard. The door to room 7 was ajar, the room inside untouched, as if no one had ever been there. I approached the front desk with a sense of unease. The lobby was quiet, too quiet, and the same man was there, polishing the counter with a rag that had seen better days. His presence, once merely strange, now felt menacing. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I noticed something odd last night. One of the guests left really late, and the room next to mine seems vacant." The motel owner stopped polishing and looked up, his smile never reaching his eyes. "People come and go at all hours, friend. It's the nature of a place like this." "But you said last night was fully booked," I pressed, watching his expression for any telltale signs of deceit. He chuckled with a weird and strange undertone. "Did I? Must have been a mistake. It happens." Unsatisfied, I decided to take a walk around the property. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at a change in the seasons. As I passed the vacant room, I glanced inside. The bed was made, not a crease on the sheets and no personal items on the dresser. It was as if the room was staged for a show that no one would watch. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked to the picnic area where I had seen the group last night. The ground was littered with cigarette butts and a single worn-out shoe, oddly out of place. I picked it up, examining it. It looked recent, not something that had been there for long. Feeling a growing sense of alarm, I decided to check the other rooms as casually as I could. Each room told the same story: perfectly made beds, untouched personal items, and an eerie feeling of abrupt abandonment. By midday, my nerves were frayed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. I returned to my room, my mind racing with possibilities. The familiar faces, the late-night departures, the pristine rooms, they all added up to a chilling pattern. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs squeaking under my weight, and pulled out my phone to search for any news or reports about the motel. What I found chilled me to the bone. There were multiple reports of missing persons last seen at the Crossroads Motel. Each story was the same: checked in, never checked out, belongings left behind as if they'd vanish into thin air. I dialed the local police, my hands trembling as I explained what I'd found. The dispatcher was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a tone that suggested this wasn't their first call about this place. "We've had reports, yes. Officers are on their way. Stay put and don't confront the owner." As I ended the call, a knock came at my door. Heart in my throat, I approached cautiously. It was the motel owner, his smile gone, replaced by a look of cold indifference. "You're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," he said, his voice low and threatening. I backed away as he stepped closer, my mind racing for a way out. "The police are coming," I blurted, hoping to deter him. He paused, then laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the small room. "No one will believe you, just like they didn't believe the others." I realized then that this man was involved in the disappearances. I needed to escape before I became another unsolved mystery. I feigned calm, nodding as if I believed him, then said I needed to get something from my car. Once outside, I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, where I flagged down a passing car, breathless and terrified. The driver, a middle-aged woman, saw the fear in my eyes and didn't hesitate to call 911 again. As we waited for the police to arrive, I watched from a safe distance as several patrol cars descended on the motel. The owner was led out in handcuffs, his expression one of defeated malice. Later, I learned that the motel had been a front for a human trafficking ring. The guests hadn't left. They'd been taken. My late-night sighting and subsequent investigation had sparked the raid that saved countless others. As I finally left the Crossroads behind, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I had escaped, and profound sorrow for those who had not. The motel's neon sign flickered one last time in my rearview mirror, a fading beacon of nightmares I'd never forget. Story 2. The Gateway Motel loomed out of the fog like something out of an old film noir, faded, a bit crooked, and whispering secrets through its cracked windows. I had driven 3 hours from the city, following the thread of a story that had gone cold for too long. As an investigative journalist, it was my bread and butter to dig up what others wanted to stay buried. I checked in under a pseudonym, a habit picked up from too many stories involving too many dangerous people. The lobby was empty, except for the clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a thin, pressed smile. "Room 9, she said, handing me a key with a heavy keychain. "Enjoy your stay." The room was at the end of a dimly lit corridor that smelled of mildew and old smoke. Inside, Room 9 was a capsule of the 1970s, with mustard yellow curtains and a bedspread in a psychedelic swirl. It was the last known location of Sarah Jennings, the third victim to disappear in the last year. I dropped my bag and started my sweep of the room. It was standard procedure for me: check for anything out of place or unusual. Under the guise of looking for bed bugs, I lifted the mattress. That's when I noticed the first clue: a small uneven seam in the wallpaper behind the bed. Curiosity piqued. I pulled at the wallpaper gently. It peeled back to reveal a crude door in the wall, cleverly concealed and painted over. Heart racing, I opened it to find a narrow, dark passage. It was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The passage led to a small room, absent from the motel's official blueprints I had managed to glimpse online. Inside, the air was stifling, heavy with dust and the faint, unmistakable scent of decay. My flashlight beam landed on a small table with various personal items, watches, wallets, and trinkets, likely belonging to the missing persons. Photographs were tacked to the wall, each marked with dates and cryptic notes. As I documented everything with my camera, I realized that I had stumbled upon the heart of the mystery. This wasn't just a case of a few isolated disappearances. This was organized, premeditated. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps in the corridor snapped me back to reality. I slipped back into room 9 just as the doorknob turned. Hiding in the bathroom, I held my breath as the door opened. It was the motel owner, a broad-shouldered man with a demeanor that seemed too calm for comfort. "Just checking to see if everything's to your liking," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge that made my skin crawl. "Everything's fine, thank you," I managed to reply, stepping out and hoping my face didn't betray my racing heart. His gaze lingered a moment too long, a silent warning that he was not fooled by my calm exterior. After he left, I made my decision. It was too dangerous to stay. I needed to leave, but first I had to make sure the evidence made it out with me. I packed the photographs and notes into my bag, carefully resealed the secret room, and left room 9, heading straight for my car. But as I reached the parking lot, I realized it wasn't going to be that easy. The tires of my car had been slashed. Trapped, I retreated back to my room, my mind racing for alternatives. It was clear the motel owner knew I was onto something and wasn't about to let me leave easily. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Using my phone, I sent the photographs to my editor, along with a message explaining everything. If something happened to me, the story would still get out. That done, I prepared for a long night. Hours ticked by, each minute stretching out endlessly. I jumped at every sound, every creak of the old building settling into the cold night. Then, breaking the silence, came a knock at my door. "I know what you found," the voice came through the door, firm and chilling. It was the motel owner, and he was not alone. "Let's talk about it." I weighed my options. Going with them could mean disappearing like the others, but refusing could escalate things quickly. I opened the door, ready to negotiate or fight, whichever came first. What I didn't expect was the flash of police sirens through the window behind them. My message had gotten through and help had arrived faster than I could have hoped. The motel owner and his accomplices were arrested and the hidden room was uncovered by the authorities. As the sun rose over the Gateway Motel, it shone light on the darkest corners of its history. The missing were remembered and their stories told. As for me, I was just grateful to be heading home, the weight of the unsolved lifted, at least for now. Story 3. The Red Oak Motel was a nondescript dot on the highway map, nestled between sprawling fields and overgrown woods. It was the perfect place to disappear for a while, or so I thought when I drove up under the cover of a dreary, drizzling rain. I had left everything behind, my city, my job, and a relationship that had turned dangerously possessive. All I carried with me were a few belongings and a need for anonymity. The lobby was empty except for the flicker of a television playing to no one. The man behind the counter glanced up as I entered, his eyes briefly registering surprise before settling into indifference. "One room, please," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline that hadn't quite left my system. "Room 7? End of the hall." His voice was monotone, and he didn't ask for a name, which suited me just fine. The key was heavy in my hand, an old-fashioned brass piece that felt reassuringly tangible. Room 7 was exactly as I expected. 2 beds with floral comforters, a heavy-set dresser, and a window that looked out over the rain-soaked parking lot. The mundanity of it was comforting. But as the night settled in, so did an uneasy feeling. It started with whispers, so faint I thought I was imagining them. Then came a soft, unmistakable crying from the room next door, Room 8, which I had passed earlier, noticing the no vacancy sign hung on the doorknob. Curiosity, mixed with a sense of unease, drew me to the wall I shared with Room 8. I pressed an ear against the cool plaster, listening. The sounds were intermittent, whispers followed by a stifled sob, then silence, and it would start all over again. I called the front desk. "I'm hearing noises from the next room," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "That's impossible," the clerk replied curtly. "Room 8 is unoccupied tonight." The line went dead, and I stood there, phone in hand, more unsettled than before. The rational part of my mind urged me to lock my door and ignore it, but the journalist in me, the part that had always chased stories and sought truth, couldn't let it go. With a deep breath, I left my room and moved quietly down the hall to room 8. The door was slightly ajar, which contradicted everything the clerk had just told me. Pushing it open, I braced myself for anything. Inside, room 8 was in disarray. The bed was unmade, and personal items were scattered across the floor as if someone had left in a hurry. But it was the bathroom that caught my attention. The light was on, and the door was slightly open. As I approached, the whispers grew louder, and I realized they were coming from behind the bathroom mirror. It wasn't just a mirror, but a door to something else. A small, hidden room. Heart pounding, I opened it to find a cramped space filled with monitors and recording equipment. The screens showed various rooms of the motel, including mine. Someone had been watching, listening. The implications hit me hard and fast. My ex, the one I had fled, had connections I hadn't fully understood. Could he have found me so quickly? I didn't have time to process it further. The door to room 8 burst open and 2 figures stepped in, the clerk and a man I recognized all too well. My ex, his face twisted into a grimace of anger and triumph. "You really thought you could get away?" he sneered. The situation was dire, and I knew I had to think fast. "The police are on their way," I lied, hoping it sounded more convincing than it felt. His hesitation gave me just enough time. I pushed past them, running for the safety of the lobby, screaming for help. My ex was close behind, but so were the sounds of sirens. Real this time, not a bluff. Police lights bathed the motel in blue and red as officers took my ex and the clerk into custody. It turned out the motel had been used for more than just a hideout. It was part of a larger network my ex had ties to, one that involved illegal surveillance and stalking. As dawn broke over the Red Oak Motel, the place that had promised anonymity and safety, I sat wrapped in a blanket provided by one of the officers. The night's horrors would haunt me, but I also felt a grim satisfaction. I had uncovered a truth, and in doing so, I had saved myself. The Red Oak Motel would close, its doors shut like the secrets it once kept. And as for me, I was finally free to start over, with the whispers and cries now just a memory, a reminder of the night when my past caught up to me, and I faced it head on.